I want to talk about Harvard. And this was on my radar because I was talking to a good friend of mine that still works at the University of Michigan. And they were communicating to me that the students, the alumni, people that were not even a part of the university up in Ann Arbor were protesting, telling the university to stand against Trump. Let me say that again for the people in the back. They were communicating to the regents. So the regents are the ones that determine the path of the university. It's kind of like a board, right? And a publicly traded company. You have a board. The board is the ones that really control the company. And they are the ones that hire the CEO to execute on the vision and ultimately return shareholder value. And so it's similar at any major university. They usually have a board of governors, a board of regents. You can even vote on some of these inside of your election. I bet you didn't know that. This is one of the reasons why you got to participate in the election process. We keep saying, well, our vote don't matter. It absolutely matters. It 100% matters. Even when it comes to the people that control the destiny of the universities that you attend or that your children will eventually attend. And what I've noticed over the years, because I at one point worked at the University of Michigan way back in like 2010, 12, something like that, right? 12, 13, 14 or whatever. University of Michigan has changed. Ann Arbor has changed. Maybe not the university so much, but Ann Arbor has changed. Where the University of Michigan is. It has become so liberal, so crazy, that it is one of the pioneering places that advocated for and then also progressed into transitioning surgery for children. It was one of the leading places that helped for the surgery of children that transitioned from boy to girl or girl to boy. And now there's adults that was a part of that program that's walking around and having conversations and saying things like, hey, listen, I regret it. I wish my parents had waited. You guys need to let your children be children. And then eventually, if they become adults, then they can start having a conversation and do whatever it is that they want to do. But Ann Arbor is a very, very, very liberal place. Very liberal place. Much different than even the 2010s when I worked there, right? The Democrat Party used to be a different party. It wasn't so extreme left. You guys know me. I'm not an advocate for extreme left, extreme right, any of that stuff. I think our children need to be protected. I think that these campuses are largely becoming indoctrination camps, and diversity, equity, and inclusion didn't help anybody. All it did was gave people an excuse to continue to get rid of people that was supposed to be there in favor of people that didn't meet it from a merit-based perspective. However, Harvard is considered one of the most prestigious learning institutions in the world. And there has been protests on the campuses of places like Harvard, Columbia, University of Michigan, places like that. Columbia largely acquiesced over into whatever it is that Trump said that he wanted to implement in a merit-based system and get away from diversity, equity, and inclusion, and started to leave our universities from being indoctrination camps. But Harvard took a little bit different of a stance. Let me play this, and then we're going to come back and have a conversation about it, all right?
The Trump administration tonight firing back at Harvard University after the school basically set up a showdown with the Trump administration, rejecting some of the White House's demands on its policies. A White House spokesperson saying, in part, President Trump wants to end unchecked anti-Semitism and that Harvard's response could put its federal funding at risk. But Harvard's president says the university will not surrender its independence and that neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government. The Trump administration had something like 10 demands for Harvard, including the elimination of DEI programs and the restriction of acceptance of international students who are, and I'm quoting here, hostile to American values and institutions. Stephanie Gosk is joining us.
So before I get into the whole chain of events that's happened in less than 48 hours between Harvard and the Trump administration, what is so bad about requiring people that come from international backgrounds, fly into the to the United States of America, attend our universities, and requiring to them to meet the expectations that we have of our own citizens in the United States of America. That you cannot be hostile towards American values and institutions. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that promote things and people above people that actually deserve to be there in our merit-based system? Implement merit-based admissions and hiring practices. So the best person for the job is the person that gets the job. The best person, or the person that has the best grades, the best background, the best possibility of being able to graduate and adding into our economy, adding into the United States of America systems, all of that. That is the person that gets it above the person that may not meet as many expectations. You should not push out a person, or they should not be punished for being the best at what they do. I'm trying to understand what is so difficult and what's so wrong. Thank you, A.R. Smitty. I'm going to read that shortly. What is so difficult and what's so problematic about those requirements? Because you do realize that they get an exceptional, and when I mean exceptional, an exceptional amount of money from our taxpayer dollars and from the federal government. So if you're going to be sourcing private funds, then you need to meet the expectation, or public dollars, then you need to meet the expectation of what taxpayers are demanding that you do.
Now, you couldn't think of a perhaps bigger name in the world of college universities to go basically head to head with the Trump administration on some of these controversial changes that the White House wants. What happens next here?
Well, it's interesting, Hallie. First of all, it's worth pointing out that Harvard receives $9 billion worth of federal funding from the government.
That is a problem. That is absolutely a problem. Did y'all hear this number? Do y'all hear how many of your tax dollars are going to these institutions of higher learning, a private college that largely turns into an indoctrination camp? Harvard receives some form of about $9 billion. $9 billion. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to deep dive into exactly where those numbers come from and how it's allocated, but think about this for a reason. Obviously, they get federal funding as a university. They also get funding in the form of research dollars and grants and all of these different things. So the United States of American taxpayers are helping to fund institutions of higher learning. And when they put parameters of what they can and can't do as a result of getting the money, how can you set up a fight with the taxpayers? Because they're not fighting with Trump. They're fighting with taxpayers. Let's play it out.
And so that's a real hammer that the government has, and can hold that above Harvard University, try to get them to make some of these changes. This letter that Harvard received on Friday night is really long, and it has a lot of very specific things that they are calling on the university to do to get this funding. Among them are things like hiring an independent third party to determine whether there's anti-Semitism on campus and in the curriculum. Also to make sure that there's diversity of opinion on campus. And you've heard a bunch of White House officials, including the vice president himself, talking about how there is throughout our universities, a kind of sickness where there is no diversity of opinion. And this is clearly part of an effort to change the way universities operate. And they're holding this funding, which is really how research is done at universities, in large part because of this funding. They are holding that over the heads of schools and universities around the country.
Harvard is a wealthy school. They just are, right? How much of an impact is this going to have on them? Let's say they were to use that federal funding. To your point, Steph, in the world of carrots and sticks, I mean, that's a big one. How much of an impact could this actually have?
Well, really big. I mean, $9 billion is a lot of money. The school very clearly relies on it, and yes, they are an incredibly wealthy school. But if that is removed, that will change how research is done on campus. But interestingly, Harvard taking a stand in a very public way, and not just about itself, also saying that universities and schools around the country should follow their lead. They are calling this a violation of their First Amendment rights. Hallie.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top.
What Harvard is saying is they are the smartest of the group, but then they're going to oppose the Trump administration and say, you know what? We're not really interested in meeting this expectation. We're going to fight, even though you guys are giving us over $9 billion in funding, we're going to fight this. And we're going to require you to still send us over $9 billion a year. Oh, okay. Well, this is what happened after the protests, after Harvard's president and their alumni decided that they wanted to take a stand against the Trump administration. This is how it wound up playing out.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Tanaka with a WBZ News update. The federal government is freezing billions of dollars in funding to Harvard University. The move happened after the university's decision to reject a list of demands from the Trump administration. The government is now pulling $2.2 billion in grants and $60 million in contracts from Harvard. The Trump administration had asked the school for broad reforms, including changing admissions policies, an audit of diversity on campus, and the university to stop recognizing some student clubs. Well, an Uber driver in Salem says he feels lucky to be alive after he was caught in the crossfire of a shooting.
Because I want to also get CNN's perspective, because I always like to get the liberal view so that we can get the full gist of what's going on over there. Here's Caitlin Collins. We're actually going to talk about her a little bit later in the show.
Major clash is now unfolding between President Trump and his battle against some of America's top universities, announcing this evening more than $2.2 billion in federal funding has been frozen for multi-year grants and contracts at Harvard. That comes after Harvard said tonight that it was rejecting a list of demands from the administration on sweeping changes and would fight back against them. Those demands came from a federal task force that the administration says is combating anti-Semitism on college campuses following protests against the war in Gaza. But the list of demands included things like dismantling diversity initiatives, auditing academic and hiring practices, and also installing leaders who are committed, the White House said, to implementing the changes they want to see. We saw a response from Harvard tonight, and the legal team responding to that saying, quote, the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. Neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government. Now, Harvard's $9 billion that's at stake here is just a fraction of the billions that the Trump administration has been targeting at schools across the country. Harvard's decision, though, appears to be the first time that we have seen a school directly refusing to comply. This comes as the Harvard faculty chapter of the American Association of University Professors and its national counterparts sued the Trump administration. My source tonight is the Harvard law professor and general counsel of the organization. At the heart of this lawsuit, Andrew Manuel Crespo is here in his first TV interview since that suit was filed. And so thank you so much, sir, for being here. Given all of these developments happening tonight, can I first just get your response to the administration saying tonight that it's going to have this $2.2 billion freeze? What kind of impact does that have?
Well, thanks so much for having me. And while this cut is obviously deeply disappointing and a real blow, not just to Harvard, but to higher education across the United States, it's not exactly unexpected. The Trump administration has been threatening to withhold and then withholding millions and then billions of dollars from some of the leading institutions of higher education in the country. The impacts of those cuts will be severe, not just to cutting-edge research, cures for cancer, cures for diseases, studies that try to understand the most cutting-edge technology, but also all of the work that happens at these universities with respect to how we study our history, the things that are essential to our democracy. There's a lot that happens at these universities that are essential to having a free democracy, and that's, I think, exactly the reason why they're all under attack. So the impact is significant, but I'm
as a person that has worked at a university and that has studied extensively how universities use these funds, I will personally tell you that universities, first of all, has historically, some of the major universities, University of Michigan, if you can get a job in any of these places, they don't pay a lot of money, but they have a really, really great benefit package because obviously you are working for an institution of higher learning. Most of the time it is a public college. And so you are basically working for a nonprofit organization. Your retirement package is a little bit different. You don't have a 401k, you have a 403b, for example. The University of Michigan was the first place that I ever worked at that double matched. They double matched your retirement, right? They also paid for you to go to college, 100% almost tuition free. In a STEM field, as a matter of fact, because a lot of places, a lot of organizations, a lot of places that you may work at, they might not pay for it depending on the curriculum that you suggest. They may want to pay for you to go to school. That may be a part of your benefit package, but it has to be something that's more closely aligned to how you're going to benefit that said business or organization, right? Healthcare coverage was exceptional. All of the benefit packages was exceptional. Working from home, you get all of these perks and benefits, right? And so historically, working for the federal government or for a nonprofit organization or a major university is attractive, not because you need the money, right? That's one of the hacks that I give people or that I tell people, in that you don't have to pay 100% for schooling or college. You can forego the money, especially if you have another business that's booming, or you have some other job, or you have something that you got going on the side that largely covers any of your real expenses, and you want to leverage it to go to school. I went to community college. Eventually, I transferred over to a major university. University of Michigan also helped pay for that education. And so that is how I then limited the amount of exposure that I had to student loans while at the same time running up a bag, because the schedule that I had made for easy, it was very easy for me to run other businesses, do other things. They didn't even limit me. I didn't have to sign a non-compete agreement, any of these things. But I will tell you that I had a lot of interactions with a lot of people within the major university sector. I worked at like one block away from the big house on Green Street. And it's funny because I talked to some of the colleagues I used to work with. All of them still work there. Why? Job protection. You never really get layoffs. The University of Michigan did not suffer. The whole Metro Detroit area was impacted hard by what happened in the housing crisis in 2008. Ann Arbor, they went along business as usual. Why? Because universities were largely protected by the federal government, and also people would go to school and enroll more. Once you started to hit a recession or the housing crisis, people went back to school in order to get new skill sets so that they can compete for the jobs that was to come. But they get a lot of money to study this and to study that, and new emerging technologies that will eventually be leveraged by the government or other organizations. I remember the University of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, at one point was using research dollars and grants to figure out how we can prolong our roads so that you didn't have to redo the roads longer. And so they was doing a special set of concrete or mix to where it actually lasted more than triple the length of whatever it is that it cost, that it lasted regularly, right? So that you wouldn't have to spend more money to repair the roads, while at the same time, the cost was a lot more than what it took to actually do the roads initially, but it lasted longer, and all of the different types of rebar and stuff. So I remember all of these research grants and these jobs and these opportunities largely buoy the entire city. Whatever respective city that you live in, or whatever respective city that these universities exist in, that is the industry. The industry is largely based around the university itself. So when you see a Harvard, that's why Boston is thriving regardless. And it's not that Boston runs its city so much greater, is that Boston has a conglomerate of major universities that is the most heralded in the world, that then buoy the city. And then ultimately that gives visibility, and that gives opportunity, because they don't have a brain drain, while at the same time other industries can then surround itself around the universities because it's largely protected by the federal government until now. So now when you see these institutions of higher learning say, well, we're going to buck up against it, Think about how many people are then impacted by you wanting to stand on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or an opportunity for a man to go inside of a woman's bathroom. You see what I'm saying? There's more than just, oh, they think that they tough. You know how many people are impacted because you want to go out there and protest? Now you up here facing a $2.9 billion budget shortfall. Then that's when you got to start tapping into your reserve funds or your funds that you have as far as a part of an endowment that kept tuition prices lower or helped to keep the university solvent and buoyed it so that it wouldn't be affected whenever you have pandemics or downturns. That is what that endowment does. It allows for you to invest the money so that it makes more money, and then it protects the university while at the same time benefiting the students so that you can come up with better budgets and then do things that are better on campus that'll improve the lives of people that want to go to these institutions of higher learning. And Harvard made the mistake of thinking that they can negotiate with somebody that wrote the art of the deal. And so immediately, in less than 24 hours after they rebuffed Trump, he pulled $2.9 billion in funding. And guess what? He's able to do so because it's our taxpayer dollars that is being distributed by the federal government to then support these institutions that then teach your children that they can't think anything other than to be liberal and that your liberal ways are the only ways that we need to go about doing things.
I'm really proud to see Harvard standing up to fight.
Well, you filed your lawsuit before we saw how Harvard was going to respond tonight. And essentially, you were arguing that the threat to cut this funding violates free speech and other.
If y'all not sending this to your family and friends, if you're not sending this to all of your people, because more than just our political perspective, I like to inform people and give them some insight that's much deeper than what they give you on a surface level from traditional media outlets. We can deep dive. I can give you some insight. I can give you, more understanding as to why it is that this is so important and the industries that are affected. It's much deeper than just what's on the surface as far as the headlines that you see from these places. Come on, y'all. Let's get deeper and let's better understand so that we can leverage this information and then be able to have better conversations with people in real life. You need to be sending this to your family and friends. Hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you tap into the Patreon. Let's rock, man.
First Amendment rights here. Given Harvard is the first school that we've seen respond this way, how does that impact your lawsuit, and what does that mean for this going forward?
Well, I think the Trump administration's decision to cut $2.2 billion from Harvard tonight makes clear just how essential this lawsuit is and how critical this fight is, and why it's so important for Harvard and really every university in the country to take a stand at this critical moment, because this is a clear, unquestionable violation of First Amendment rights. You mentioned some of the demands that the administration has made of Harvard. It includes things like trying to appoint a federally named oversight.
Nope, they said a third party that go in and inspects and make sure that they abide by whatever it is that they're supposed to do.
Official to do an audit of every course, every department at Harvard to see if we have ideological balance to meet the Trump administration's test for what we teach and what we say at these universities. It's a transparent effort to change what is taught, what we say in our classrooms, what we teach our students, to make sure that the only things that are actually said on university campuses are things that the Trump administration wants to hear and wants to be said. This is a move that happens in countries across the world when there are efforts to try to make an authoritarian play in government. Institutions that are essential to civil society, like the press, like the courts, like the legal profession, and universities are the first to come under attack. And that's what we've been seeing over the first few weeks of this administration, with that attack on universities coming full and hard now. And this is the moment when it's so essential for those universities to take a stand. And if there's any university in the world that has the resources to do that and the moral leadership to do that, it's Harvard. And I'm proud to call myself a member of this faculty today.
And
so there you go. In a nutshell, that is what is happening on the campus of Harvard. I'm assuming that people that actually support HBCUs don't give a flying F about it because they listen, maybe we can start the lobby for more funding, and that's what y'all should be doing, to actually start the lobby for more research dollars to meet the expectations of whatever it is that these institutions are not meeting so that you can get the funding for yourself.